Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth, the study of truth, opposite of mythology, which is science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. Many of you have asked me, can you use Sattology in your, because it's a copyright of Sattology, Everyday Chant Inc., that can we use it? And in your day-to-day, of course you can use it. Only thing we don't allow is a commercial side of it. So when you're trying to use Sattology in a commercial venture, that's time the copyright kicks in. Other than that, it's a word created by me for everybody to use. Debunking mythology. It's just an antonym of mythology. Everybody can use it. Now, second question people ask that how we can become part of the Sattology team. We have very simple criteria. You have to go through our course, 12x Debunking Mythology course, and you have to give an exam, and after that you join our course. Today I have a very special guest. People have been trying to get him on the show for 4 months. That's what I've been told. And he has agreed to come here, and it's very good videos he has produced. And also they run a very important part which is needed today, which is the spread of Ramayana. And he's the the idea generator or the owner of the concept of 21 notes. We have heard about 64 notes of Krishna, but this is 21 notes, very special. So let us welcome Yashodeep Deodhar.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Welcome to the show. So just tell me before we get started, tell me about yourself, like what inspired you. You're very highly educated and from the top schools of India, both engineering as well as management, the #1 rated schools of India. What inspired you to start going to this venture?
Well, it was it was a strange turn of events. 5 years back, I was running my own business, and I thought I would run that for another 20 years. And my background was in engineering and management. And I loved running my business. But somehow, by some turn of events, that business got sold. And I happened to read the Ramayana. And, in India, we are all familiar with the story of Ramayana, broadly, or at least we think we know the Ramayana. But what I found when I read the Valmiki Ramayana simply blew my mind away. This was not the Ramayana I thought I knew. And, the reason I got into it was also strange. I got a book on the Valmiki Ramayana, a series of commentaries on the Valmiki Ramayana, and these were in Marathi. And the only reason I read the book was because my mother had edited it. But when I read that, I said, hey, I need to get to the bottom of this. This is so exciting. And then I started reading the Valmiki Ramayana in the original Sanskrit text. And the more I read it, the more amazed I was, and I wanted to share it with everyone. So the 21 Notes YouTube video series is simply an effort to share the original, the true words of Maharshi Valmiki. I would like everyone to read the Valmiki Ramayana for themselves. But 24,000 verses in Sanskrit may not be for everyone. And so in university, you borrow your friend's notes when you can't read the full text. So these are my notes. If you can't read the full text, you can watch these videos. That, in essence, is the motivation for doing this. This is a non-profit effort. Of course, there's no monetization on YouTube. I don't charge for speaking. All I want to do is, I found a very inspiring. When I read it, I was very inspired, and I want to share it with all of you.
It's so amazing that so many people from different walks of life, they're coming forward to explore their true self, like your own liking, which you're doing. I have written one book called One Arrow, One Kill, which is based on Valmiki Ramayana, and I've been traveling to places mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana. And that's what I've been doing 2 days, including Peru, Candelava Prakas. Udaygiri is that mountain, Andes. Now, tell me one thing. What is in Ramayana that inspires people like you?
you mentioned that there is so much sort of amongst us, perhaps a new renewal or a new interest. And about that, I'd like to make this comment. If you visit the Ellora caves near Mumbai, actually near Aurangabad, and I'm just taking an example of one particular cave temple, but there are so many other examples. So these temples were cut out of rock. People started chipping away at a whole mountain, and they chipped away at the rock till what was left was a multi-storied temple. Instead of building it brick by brick or stone by stone from bottom up, they chipped away at rock and built the temple. And this is an entire temple complex that was built over 600 years. And the main temple, right in the middle, on the two sides of this temple, are carved out 2 stories. Now, I've done many talks in schools and colleges in India, and if I ask the students, so which 2 stories do you think these will be? Mostly somebody in the audience does reply, Ramayana and Mahabharata. And that's right, because these 2 are the stories that have so inspired our ancestors throughout the land. That think about it, they spent 600 years chipping away at rock to carve out the story. What is it about this story? And people like me, 5 years back, if you ask me, what role does Ramayana play in your life? For most of us, the honest answer will be not much. We may say, oh, today's youth, the children are not really that conversant with the story. But what about us? And actually, the Ramayana is a story which has applications in our day-to-day lives, every day of our lives. It inspires us to understand what is the right thing to do and gives us the energy to do it. So my own journey was to share with all of you. One of the reasons that it has lost the connect with a lot of us is that of all the many retellings of the Ramayana, the very first one, Maharishi Valmiki's Ramayana, is actually the most contemporary one. It resonates with the contemporary mind the most, but it is one that has been forgotten to some extent because the later retellings have become so popular that many people are not familiar. And the Valmiki Ramayana in that way is actually quite different from the later retellings with which with many of us are familiar.
The Western audience may be like some of the many Western people, they know about Ramayana, but they do not know the way it was told. And you correctly said it, that the Valmiki Ramayana has so much historical information, geographical information, that it blows up the mind of even a technologist like you and me. Because you know what it means to be a scientific research. And people will say science is separate than the text. And that's the Western thing, that science is separate. So science is a different religion now in US, because every single politician, other than quoting their own religious text,
well, the sages of the past did not know what categories we would have for the knowledge in our times. So they didn't follow any of these categories. And in the same text, although the main purpose of the Ramayana is to show a highest example of good behavior, but there are many hidden gems of other knowledge as well. But, let me also say, since you said that your audience may not be that familiar with the Ramayana, let me also mention that what is the purpose of the Ramayana? Why did Maharishi Valmiki write it in the first instance? And interestingly, so this is the Adi Kavya, the oldest epic of India. And interestingly, Maharishi Valmiki had said in his own epic, Yavat sthasyanti girayah saritascha mahitale tavat Ramayana katha lokeshu pracharishyati. Until the mountains and the rivers exist on this earth, Ramayana, the story of Ram, will always be told. So the oldest epic, he was confident that this is something that is going to be relevant for all times to come. Why is that? The answer is simple. Valmiki was writing the Ramayana to set the highest example of good behavior. In the very second verse, he starts off and he says, who in the world lives today? Kon vasmin sampratam loke. Who has the following qualities? And he makes a list of qualities. He wants to write about a person who has these qualities. Now, what is the purpose of a book which sets the highest example of good behavior? As long as there is bad behavior in society, which he called Rakshas tendencies, Rakshasness, or Rakshasatvam. As long as there is bad behavior in society, and where is the bad behavior? It is in us. It is in all of us, in individuals. The way to remove bad behavior in society is to remove the bad behavior in each one of us by setting in front of us the highest example of good behavior. So the purpose of the Ramayana is very simple. How can I be the best version of who I am, who I have the potential to be? And to be this person, can I set the highest example of good behavior in front of us, be inspired by that, and make a change for the better in my own lives?
For many,
yeah,
go ahead.
I said that was, in short, a brief introduction to the relevance of the Ramayana, since you said that your audience may not be that familiar with, why is this book important? Why are we talking about it?
Most of my audience has read my book, One Arrow, One Kill. And also in India, if people are watching in India, also this show have already read Global Footprint of Ramayana, plus Ramayana is already available. And so one interesting thing comes in now. The Ramayana also shows another side of Sri Ram, which is very attractive to the youth. He's always carrying weapons, always exercising. His shoulders are well formed, and he's inspiring people to, taking action, because today's youth wants action. And this is the best book of action, like different kinds of actions, right? From Ram traveling with Vishwamitra with his bow and destroying Tataka, destroying other. So there is a lot of action here. And some people, the artificial pacifists, there is not a single day, right? And I was reading a statistic that today, as we are speaking, there are 41 wars going on in the world. And sorry to say that, one man, every minute, a man commits a suicide in USA. Every minute. So every 60 minutes, every hour, every minute, like 60 seconds, there's one suicide by a man losing hope. And this is due to many reasons. And sometimes it is also a reason with proactive feminism. And that's why it happens. But here we see an example of Sri Ram. He's facing a lot of issues which he should not be facing. He has to go to the forest, and his wife is kidnapped, but he doesn't lose hope. He builds an army of monkeys and goes. So
Vanaras, mind you, Vanaras. We'll come to that.
Yes. So but he builds an army and goes all the way, crosses 100 yojana, which is 800 miles, and destroys the enemy. Now, people are looking for that kind of decisive military leaders and political leaders also. So the people, when I saw the...
Aditya sorry if I'm
good.
coming in.
Yes,
I want to pick up on some of the things that you have said.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned he is a greatest of all, he's the greatest of all warriors. In fact, in one of the descriptions of Sri Ram, Valmiki says, Guda Jatruhu, his shoulder blades, the muscles are such that the shoulder blades are not seen because the muscles are so well defined. He is the greatest of warriors. But this is not merely a war story. You mentioned action, but actually, there are two aspects. If the two most important aspects in the Ramayana are when to accept and when is the time for action. So, since your audience is broadly familiar with the story, I will point out that in the Ayodhya Kand, the second book of the Ramayana, on the day of his coronation, and Ram is chosen, he's about to be coronated as the Yuvaraj, the next king. But due to some turn of events, uh, and basically his father, the King Dashrath, had given two promises to Kaikeyi. Two promises, you can consider them as two blank checks. So he had signed off on two blank checks a long time back and given them to Kaikeyi. Kaikeyi came back with the amounts filled up. On one check, she had written, and using the check figuratively, one promise, she said she would like Bharat, her son, to be the king. And on the other check, she filled up and said Ram should be sent off into exile. Now, that was a demand. And Ram, at that time, said very simply that he just has to accept this turn of events because the checks have been signed. In other words, the promises were made, and he has to just abide by the promise that the king has made. Because if the king's promise is not, cannot be sacrosanct, if it is not upheld, then how can anyone's word be trusted? How will there? This is a most a blatant violation of dharma, and he must uphold the king's promise. And so what he did was accept. At that time, there was no action. And in fact, his own brother disagreed with him. Lakshman said, what are you talking of? You are the rightful successor, and you must now take over the empire. In fact, Lakshman said, I will help you. And even if there is a civil war, I will kill everybody, even if it comes to that. You must take action and take over the empire. But Ram said, this is not the time for that kind of action. I must accept because the king's word must be held true. So there is a time for acceptance. And in fact, Ram could have easily, Lakshman disagreed with him. His own mother Kausalya disagreed. And even his guru, Vasishtha, disagreed with him. Vasishtha went to the extent saying that your father is telling you to go, but I'm your guru and I'm your father's guru as well. And I'm telling you, do not go. Even Bharat, who was supposed to get the kingdom, disagreed and said, Ram, if I got the kingdom, I am giving it to you. There were many arguments, discussions, debates. But in the end, everyone was convinced that what Ram was saying was true. So Ram chose he said, there is no choice for me. He said, I just have to accept it. There is no question of me going against the king's promise, the king's word. So that was the time for acceptance. And he demonstrated that. But when Sita got kidnapped, that was not the time for acceptance. He did not say, oh, whatever happened, perhaps that was fate. She got kidnapped. Let me go back to Ayodhya. That was the time for action. And action of what magnitude? As you said, he put together an army, but of Vanaras, the forest dwellers. He went all the way to Lanka. He defeated the Rakshas king Ravan, and got Sita back. So there is a time for acceptance and a time for action. And Ram demonstrated both of these in the Ramayana.
So there is a story since you have read Valmiki Ramayana very well, Brahma, before Ram comes down, where Vishnu is invited to kill Ravan, because Brahma had given a boon to Ravan to Ravan was foolish enough to not accept threat from humans, Manushya.
Yes.
So when Brahma sent them, Brahma told all the Devatas, because when Vishnu comes, all the Devatas come down. Just like when Prime Minister Modi goes, or Prime Minister or President of any country goes, all the officials go down first to prepare the land or the ground. So he said to different Devatas that go and take birth in Vanara families, rich families, all the different. And everybody's identity is told. Indra's son, who became Indra's son, Suryadev's son became, Sugriv. Yes. And Vali was Indra's son. And like this. And Hanumanji was Vayudev's son. And different Devatas were there. Even the Vishwakarma had to come down as Nal and Nil, two brothers, who are the engineers. Now, very clearly, I always triangulate, because Ramayana is in Bhagavad Puran, Ramayana is in Skanda Puran, Ramayana is in Padma Puran, and Ramayana is in Mahabharata 4 times told, including Duryodhan knew Ramayana very well. In there is an interesting conversation between Hanuman and Bhim, where Hanuman says, I am Vanara, but you are Manushya. And so very clearly distinction he makes. And he says, what can I tell you? You have more responsibility than me. Also, there is a first meeting of Hanuman and Sri Ram, where Bhagwan Ram says, because Brahma had already told the Devatas that they should have all the powers. They should be able to travel as fast as they want in the sky. They can swim across larger, because he knew what task he has to do. And because Raman's, the today we'll call it global south.
But
Raman was the leader.
again, Aditi, but let me know if I shouldn't commit. But you say
Go ahead,
something
go
that I
ahead.
really want to
Yes.
get back. So you mentioned the Ramayana as told in the Puranas, etc., etc. But one important thing for us to recognize is that Valmiki's Ramayana is considered throughout our tradition as itihas. Itihas means iti, ha, asa. That is how it happened. So the question, if at any point is, did this happen or did that happen? What actually happened? The reference text should be the Valmiki Ramayana and not anything else. For example, there is the well-known story of Lakshman Rekha. It is told in many versions of the Ramayana, but in Valmiki Ramayana it is not mentioned. So once again, and why the Valmiki Ramayana is important for today's generation, for today's people to understand, is that it is one of the reasons it strikes a chord is that it is itihas. It is the narration of events as they happen. And maybe I'm jumping back and forth, but I recall just before you had made this comment about people carrying arms, there is a very interesting conversation between Ram and Sita. When they are during their vanvas, when they are in the forest, before Sita has been kidnapped by Ravan, Ram vows, all the sages and the rishis and the munis appeal to Ram that they are being slaughtered by the Rakshasas. Please do something about it. So Ram says, yes, I will protect you and I will fight the Rakshasas. Afterwards, when they are walking through the forest, Sita brings this up. And she says, are you sure this is the right thing to do? Because we are here as ascetics in the forest. Maybe you should tackle the Rakshasas afterwards. When you've finished the forest life, you've gone back and you are ruling as the king. That is the time for you to take up the fights. Right now, you're an ascetic. And then she makes an interesting point. She says that when people carry arms, they have a tendency to use them. You are carrying arms. Are you getting swayed? And are you therefore, getting into this fight with the Rakshasas? It is interesting that, Ram and Sita have some very honest debates and conversations as husband and wife. And they think of the pros and cons of doing different things. Back in Ayodhya, when Sita had first said that she will come with Ram into the exile, Ram had said, no, you should not come. They had a long debate about it, a long discussion. And in the end, Ram was convinced that Sita was right and she should come. She could come with him in the exile. But this time, when they debate about whether they should take on the Rakshasas or not, this time Ram prevailed. And he did manage to convince Sita that it was indeed their responsibility while they were in the Dandakaranya to tackle the menace of the Rakshasas for the rishis. But in the end, it didn't matter because their war or their fight with the Rakshasas started because of what happened at Panchavati after Shurpankhar came and Khar attacked them with all his might. So those two side points I wanted to make, one on carrying arms and what it can do to a person, and the debate between Ram and Sita about that. I thought that was an interesting point that I had not read in the other versions of the Ramayana.
Now, what was Ram's reply?
His reply was to that it is my duty to take care of this, and I must tackle it and I must fight it. Not later, but now.
But without weapons, how will he fight?
He had the weapons, and he was confident in his might and Lakshman's might to take them on. Because
if you there is one word used in Valmiki Ramayana, Shastra Bhritam, the topmost wielder of weapons. Yes. Topmost. See, the artificial pacifism which has crept into the Indian society is completely debunked. In fact, I'll go to the Native Americans also. very old tradition, and we all know that their time of coming to the North American continent coincides with the beginning of Treta Yuga, because that's where the people crossed over. Native Americans' genes are same like you and me. Surprising, surprise, that their genes, how can their gene pool is same like Indians? And people keep asking me this question, but you and I know from the Ramayana. Now there is another interesting incident of the Virad Vad. You must have read it. And
Yes,
he's
yes.
buried live. He's buried live in the ground. And very interesting thing he says, Bhagwan Ram. Actually, in the case of Vali also says, in case of Virad also says, that this is the time Ikshwaku Vansh is ruling the planet. And on behalf of Bharat, I have the right to punish you. Vali Vad also, he says the same thing.
Yes.
Okay, on behalf of Bharatvansh, Ikshwaku Vansh, I have the right to punish you. And we only have the right to punish you. Now, these kind of incidents because the people have misrepresented Valmiki Ramayana to such an extent. Like you correctly said, it's an itihas, means it is written or it is live. When the writer is alive, and the person who is hearing is alive, like Love and Kush, when they recited
The
Ramayana in
word
the
the word
first
used
place.
is kon vasmin sampratam loke. He's saying who in the world lives today. So when he was writing, Ram was alive at that time, because he's saying, I want to write about a contemporary person.
Correct. And then Narad introduces to Valmiki that the greatest person is in beginning pages of Ramayana.
Yes.
Explains that this is a person, and this is he's Ram, and and then Valmiki was very inspired. By the way, people do not know that the assistant of Valmiki was Bharadwaj. Many people Bharadwaj Gotra. That Gotra is there. Bharadwaj was an assistant at Tamasa Nadi. So question now comes in, with the world talking about artificial pacifism and 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 the justice not being delivered. People have long queues in the modern justice systems, even USA, for people to know the statistics, that 50% of the murder cases in the USA are never solved. 50%. Whatever you see on CSI Miami or CSI, that's just a TV show. The reality is very different. Same is happening in other parts of the world also, whether it's Africa or India and other places, where the justice systems have become so convoluted that the common man has no faith left in them. And you have to hire an advocate, you have to hire this, and then there's no money left to fight an election, for fight a court case. So a lot of things are there. So when it comes to justice, here we see that people have also given bad name to Manu Smriti, which is the Manu established the city of Ayodhya. Now, combining all these different viewpoints, is the artificial pacifism condoned by Valmiki Ramayana, or it is not?
Okay. So good, you finally brought it back to the Valmiki Ramayana, because that is what I know, and I cannot comment on any other text. And as far as the Valmiki Ramayana goes, like I said before, there is a time for acceptance and there is a time for action. So there is no single answer on what is the right thing to do. You should not fight at every pretext, nor should you not fight when there is a need to do that or a reason to do that, and when there is your duty to do that. There is a time for acceptance, like it was for Ram in Ayodhya Kand, when the rightful kingdom, when he was the rightful successor to the kingdom, for some reason he was not able to, he was not made, but he had to accept it. That was the time for acceptance. But when Sita was abducted, that was not the time for acceptance. And this is a learning for all of us, that either extremes of acceptance or action or fighting is not the right answer.
See, the administration in US is called administration, and other places is called government. So the administration, when they now, which is very interesting for the youth. First of all, the youth will be inspired by Bhagwan Ram because he was a very fit person, very fit. Unlike many Ram Bhaktas today, whose stomach is too much out, but Bhagwan Ram was very fit. And Hanumanji also were very inspired by him. Regularly
Fit to the extent, you know the famous story of the 7 sal trees. So when
Correct.
Sugriv said that Vali is extremely powerful, before they had the fight with Vali, he says, my brother is very powerful. Uh, he said, can you give me some proof that you can actually take care of it? And Lakshman smiled. He knew what Ram could do, so he smiled. I said, what can he do? So he says, those sal trees, and can he split one of them? And so Ram split not one but seven sal trees. Imagine the power with which the raw power of pulling the bow and firing off an arrow at such force. So yes, they had the technology and the knowledge um, of all the astras and the shastras, but also, yes, they were extremely fit. And so was Vali, by the way. On fitness, Vali, there's a description that he used to run uphill. So he used to do uphill running, and he used to lift things, etc., to keep and increase his strength.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very common thing. The fitness was very common thing, and the entire area. Now, if you look at the Sugriva's armies, which are Sugriva was the king after Vali was defeated. Now, the youth are inspired with logic, reasoning, and other things. Like, for example, fast decision making. And you correctly said that Bhagwan Ram used to fire arrows, and his hands would not be seen on the bow. And very interesting episode of him snatching the bow from Parshuram, where Dashrath was scared. But Dashrath,
Yes.
Parshuram had just finished all the Kshatriyas, and he thought, and Dashrath, he did not attack for a reason, did not attack. And the reason was that one of the ancestors of Dashrath was protected by a woman. So Nari Kavach. So that was a thing was there. I just read it. So coming to the another aspect which really youth may get inspired from is the selective use or intelligence for solving certain problems, because these are the problems of today's day. Like I said, that there is a lot of hopelessness in the society, whether it's a USA or any other country, and the way the international economic condition is, more people are getting stressed out. And in that point of time, like it happened many years back, where Tulsidas created his own Ramayan to motivate people to read Valmiki
Yes.
Ramayan and other Ramayan. And so in this today's stress, decision making is the biggest casualty for most people. They don't know what to do. Now, based on what you're telling me now, and I'm interacting with you, I come to because everyone gets inspired by something. And I see that you are getting inspired by certain sections of Valmiki Ramayana. As a human being, only one or two things interest us. Our attention span is very less, and that guides to the whole thing. Then you start researching. Now, coming back to the first question again, what exactly inspired you? Now, you are describing me Vanara. You told me about different engineering skills, science, messages, wisdom. What exactly one episode which inspired? Then I'll tell you what inspired me.
Well, it's an interesting question, but it is not actually one episode, and I'll tell you why. That in every reading of the Ramayana, first I read, like I said, some talks on the Ramayana in Marathi, and there were certain incidents that really attracted me or inspired me. And when I read the original Valmiki Ramayana, of course, I was, I liked those incidents, but there were so many others. And then every time you read, there is something else that you like. It has happened for me, last 5 years, I've been, 4.5 years, I've been working full time on making this video series and researching the Valmiki Ramayana. When I worked on the Balakand, the first book, I thought, this is the best. Now, how can I make, Balakand goes across many years across the land. There's stories of Vishwamitra going from the Himalayas to the south. The people are traveling, there's exciting stuff happening. And now we come to Ayodhya Kand, the bulk of it, the first half of it happens only in 48 hours. It's all about emotions. And of course, incredibly deep emotions. But I thought, how can I make a video series, an animated video series that will explain these emotions. But when I worked on the Ayodhya Kand, of course, many people say that the Ayodhya Kand is the heart of the Ramayana. And I thought, yes, indeed, that is true. And such emotions, such incredible situations cannot come again. And what am I going to do in the next Kand, the Aranya Kand and the Kishkinda Kand and so on. But every time, so for a few months, I'm working on one Kand, making one season. I go deep in it. And it is at that moment you feel that this is the best, but then there is more coming. But some of the incidents that were truly revealing for me was, for example, the incident of the Vali Vad. Before I started my work on the Ramayana, if you had asked me, did Ram do the right thing about killing Vali while hiding behind a tree? For those who don't know, Vali and Sugriv were fighting, and this was a plan that Sugriv had hatched and beforehand, that Sugriv would fight Vali and Ram would fire an arrow from behind a tree and kill Vali. If you had asked me before, did Ram do the right thing? In spite of all that, all the respect and all that we hold dear to our hearts in terms of the Ramayana and Sri Ram, I would have said, maybe not. I'm not so sure that he did the right thing. How could he fire an arrow from behind a tree? And when I read the Valmiki Ramayana, it was so clear to me what was going on, because in fact, even Vali argued with Ram. He said, how could you do this? And in fact, all the arguments that we made, Valmiki has put into Vali's words. He said, Ram, you're a fraud. You talk of dharma, and now you kill me while hiding behind a tree. And I had no fight with you. Why did you do it? Tara had warned me, but I said that this would never happen. And now you've done this. Vali is dying. The arrow is in his body. And Ram tells him why he did it. And it's very clear. Ram tells him that I killed you because you are a criminal, because of what you did to Ruma, Sugriv's wife. So Vali had banished Sugriv and forcibly taken Ruma, his wife. He said, I have killed you as a criminal. Criminals are not invited to duel. They are punished. And like you said, he said the Ikshvakus are ruling the entire world, the whole world. And I am Bharat's representative in these lands. And since you have done this crime and the punishment for this crime is death, I have given you this punishment. There is no question of dueling with a criminal. Now, this is very clear. But for me, it became clear after reading the Valmiki Ramayana. And earlier, I would have been, a little confused about this event.
See, one of the there are many like the controversies. People talk about Uttarakhand and other places. You have read the whole Ramayana, and like if you remove Uttarakhand, then the rest of the Ramayana doesn't make sense, because the context of who was Ravan, what was Sita thinking, like many interesting background episodes are there. And I'm sure when Tathottare, that's a Sanskrit word Valmiki uses in the beginning, the Shadakand Tathottare, like 6 Kand and then Uttarakhand, Tathottare. So this is how you Sanskriti write it. So you correctly said 24,000 shloka, 500 sarga, and 7 Kand. This is the total description of Valmiki Ramayana. If you remove Uttarakhand, then only 16,000 are left, 18,000 are left. And if you remove Uttarakhand, then the Balkhand becomes meaningless, because there's no background to it. So tell me one thing. When people in the West, there's a big problem, like the New Testament has been changed so many times that people have gone to the motivation classes now, because they don't find anything relevant in the New Testament. And the similar arguments are being made that if ours is modified, yours too. Again, coming from a Western mindset. So most of the Western commentaries being on Ramayana, which are done by the Western authors in the US and other places of the world, there are many people comment on Valmiki Ramayana. And Indologists copy those commentaries instead of going through the original text. Like I tell people, if you can read Devanagari, you should read in Devanagari. You should think in Devanagari and speak in English if you want to speak in English, like we're doing today. But thought process should be Sanskrit based so that you can retain the originality of the thought. So what are the original thoughts which are mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana which have been destroyed by the mythologists?
Hi. I can see my video is frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Your video is frozen. Definitely, your video is frozen. Can you
I'll
try?
stop video and start again. Let's see.
Yes, please. Do that.
Is
Yes,
that better?
now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, indeed, it is best to read the Valmiki Ramayana in original for yourself. And, some of the later retellings, I would like to, also point out why they differ from the Ramayana. There is an incident that is quite popularly known, that when Angad went to speak with Ravan just before the war, to see if peace could be struck. Angad was Vali's son, a young boy, and he went to meet Ravan. It is said that he coiled his tail, expanded it, expanded his tail and coiled it, and then sat on top of it. This is a scene that is depicted in many a temple sculpture or paintings and so on. A very popular scene of Angad sitting on his coiled tail. Now in the Valmiki Ramayana, this is not mentioned. There is no expansion of the coiled tail, etc. However, I would say that the incident of the coiled tail is not incorrect. I'll tell you why. Valmiki's description of Angad speaking to Ravan shows incredible confidence. Angad is a young boy, and here is Ravan sitting on his great throne in his court, such a powerful person. And Angad speaks to him. He introduces himself. He says, "My name is Angad. I'm Ram's emissary, Vali's son." And he says, "You may have heard of me." And then the entire discussion what he says shows such confidence. It is he's speaking to Ravan as an equal. Now, how do you show this? Speaking to Ravan as an equal, how do you show this in stone? How do you show it on sculptures and in paintings? Now, this is a beautiful depiction of Angad raising himself. And how does he raise himself? By expanding his tail, told poetically, and sitting on it, and then speaking to Ravan. So, these kind of changes to the Ramayana are actually, I would say, they are not incorrect. It's a poetic retelling. And many of these versions have changed in that format. But once again, if the question is what exactly happened, then the reference text is the Valmiki Ramayana. Another, popular story is of Shabri. The popular story goes like this, that Shabri was not accepted by the other rishis, and she used to stay alone in Matanga Muni's ashram. And when Ram came, she offered him half-eaten fruits, and she had tasted them to make sure that they are sweet. And therefore, that is why they were half-eaten, because she wanted to be sure that Ram got only sweet fruits. And she offered them to Ram. And Ram, in order to make the point that she should not be discriminated against, ate those fruits. Now, this story is not there in the Valmiki Ramayana. It is told very differently. Shabri was joined in as a young attendant in Matanga Muni's ashram. And think of the ashram as a university is in today's time, a place of learning. And Shabri was a young attendant. She used to do small chores, cleaning and so forth. But she used to also sit in on the discussions among the rishis. Think of a janitor or a cleaner sitting in on the classes in a university. And over time, she became a siddha, accomplished. And importantly, she was also a siddha sammata. She was accepted and acknowledged by the other rishis. Over time, the other Matanga Muni, her guru, passed away. The other rishis went away to other places, and she was the only person left in the ashram, and she was managing the ashram. So let alone, as in the later retellings, there was no discrimination against Shabri. Even to the other extreme, here was a person who had started off as an attendant or a cleaner and had now become the head of the ashram, and she had become a full professor, if you will. She had become a siddha. Now, why did the later retellings turn the story to Shabri being discriminated? Because During the ages that this change was made, there was discrimination in society. There was not discrimination of this kind in Valmiki's time. So he had not mentioned that. But there was discrimination in society, and therefore the retellers of the Ramayana wanted to make the point that this discrimination is not right, and they used the structure of the Ramayana to make that point. So these are some of the reasons why, in later retellings, things got changed.
See, it has become a fashion to challenge or misinterpret, because it's a big industry actually for interpreting everything. And somewhere there is a conspiracy also to move people away from Ramayana. Like, for example, all these controversies are created so that people don't take shelter of Valmiki Ramayana. You correctly mentioned about Shabri, because when Shabri meets Sri Ram, Bhagwan Ram's questions are very informative. Those questions. Have you attained success in your sadhana? And
Yes.
Matanga Rishi had told her to wait for 10 years. He said that Bhagwan Ram is right now touring Dandakaranya, and she becomes the leader of the entire ashram. And
Yes.
Bhagwan Ram is so happy to visit that ashram because he sees a lion and a deer living peacefully with each other. So there is no conflict in that ashram. And he was shocked at how much, so much harmony is there in the ashram. Now, question now comes in. So what is like I said earlier, like the grapes are sour. Like if I have made a mistake, then everybody, Atmate Manite Jagat. Whatever I think, I see the world through my own prism of my own mind. If my scriptures are corrupted, because we all know that the Bible has been changed 1 million times, at least in last 600 years.
No, but Aditya ji, I think, my effort is very straightforward. I'm an engineer or whatever, a business person who happened to come across this text, and which I should have known. And I said, well, how come I didn't know about it before when I read the text? And perhaps there are others also who are not equally familiar. And the reason that they are not familiar is maybe the original text is not accessible to them. So, like we said, 24,000 verses in Sanskrit, not everyone can take the time to do it. So, it is up to us to make it easily accessible, to make it, in a way that today's students, today's youth can understand it. And then once they see what the original words are, it is up to them what to make of it. Even in the first episode, I asked the viewers that, look, make up your own mind, but only after hearing what Valmiki has said. So let us find out what he has written first and then make up our mind.
See, most of the commentators don't read the original text. Most of the commentators read the English translation. The problem is in those translations, not in the text, original text.
But yes, but once again, I am not concerned about, whether somebody is saying the right thing or I have read the Valmiki Ramayana in Sanskrit and researched it, and I want to share it. And I would urge the viewers also, look, ideally they should read it themselves, right? You have enjoyed it, and I have enjoyed the original text, and it is a fantastic journey to go along with Maharshi Valmiki's words. But if you can't do that, at least to the extent possible, read more than the commentary, the simple translations, so that at least you are familiar with what closest to what the original words are, and then make up your mind.
So coming to the, like, we covered many aspects. The last thing which comes in, that for Sita, Bhagwan Ram searched the entire planet, searched. And everything was searched on the authority of Ikshwaku Vansh. That one statement is there, that currently Ikshwaku Vansh is ruling the whole planet. When Sugriva asks his armies, who are actually Sri Ram's armies now, to go and search all over the world. He sends Vanit to the east, he says Gandhamadhan to the west, and the different Vanaras teams were sent, and the huge numbers are given. 200 Vanaras go on the east, 100,000 go on the north, and west go on. Really global, all those things. So there comes in the fact that the Western academic viewpoint of 17th century that they are the discoverers, but we find more accurate version of geography in Valmiki Ramayana itself. All the mountains places are accurately mentioned, and the sun's movement is accurately mentioned. There are many scientific facts people will be baffled with, in on which there are regular debates on the social
You see,
media.
in fact, that part where Sugriv briefs his army and asks them to go are, those sargas are basically the world atlas of that time. And this is how Valmiki has beautifully interspersed the narration with these, brilliant teachings along the way. So, at times he talks of the geography. Many places he talks about the botany, the trees that are found. Every place that he goes, because trees are the natural wealth of that place, and he records those trees. He talks about the astras and shastras of those time, and then some very interesting. The first time Ram, Lakshman, and Hanuman meet at Rishyamukh mountain, after they've had this conversation and they're going to meet Sugriv, Ram tells Lakshman, see how Hanuman spoke. He's very impressed with Hanuman. And he says, he did not hum and haw. He did not do this. He did not do that. So basically, he's giving a list of good communication skills, right? So there's botany, there's communication skills, there's governance in the Kachit Sarga of Ayodhya Kand, and there's the world atlas of Sugriv. Is so many, other bits and pieces of knowledge and information threaded around the main narrative of the story.
Yeah, these are the small descriptions which you, like a person who is having the mind of a detail will love it. Like he tells Lakshman, like you correctly said, he said he has read all the Vedas, Vedangas, and it looks like he is completely civilized on the Vedic platform, which is like he mentioned, the Sanskrit words are these words. Now, see, saying that just as a communication skill, because communication is an art of not speaking. Communication is an art of conveying a message that who he is, an identity. And so one last question is there. So I can see that your interest comes in those details. My interest is also in those finer details, not in the overall story is good that Ram met Shabri, Ram met Hanuman, but what happened?
Well, all of it, these gems that you're least expecting.
Yes. I mean, so the Hanuman's jump from Mahindra Parvat. This is when I first heard Ramayana. That jump was the most inspiring thing from the entire Ramayana.
Okay.
For me personally. Because the beauty of the verses of Valmiki Ramayana, that the flowers are competing with each other to follow, to see who reaches Lanka first. That was the way it is Alankrit Bhasha, Sanskrit Alankrit Bhasha. So it's a very beautiful rendering of the entire episode. So like this, there are how many different beautiful aspects which you noticed. Like I noticed this one. What are the other things you notice which can inspire people on the beauty of the nature, the beauty, the small details, small details?
So many, maybe I'll take one. Just when Sita was abducted and Ram and Lakshman came back to the cottage and found that she was gone, Ram is grief-stricken. He knows something terrible has happened. He looks around for Sita and he can't find, and he starts to give up hope. And at that time, he goes running, looking around for Sita like a madman, Valmiki says. And he goes to one tree and he says, have you seen my dear Sita? And he goes to another tree and he says, have you seen my dear Sita? And he describes the tree, etc., etc. Now, I cannot do justice to the beauty of the poetry, but, at first you say, why is this so melodramatic? This is a bit too much. Why is he going around to trees and asking them that, have you seen my dear Sita? And then, describing the tree and how it looks like Sita, etc. And then it strikes you that Valmiki is actually once again being the botanist, and he's giving us a description of the trees that are found in the area, and also their characteristics, the types of fruits and flowers and so on that they have, but through this extremely melodramatic and emotional situation. So in such an emotional situation, recording a list of trees, well, I can describe it a little bit, but I cannot do justice to the poetry of that part.
I mean, no one can match the poetry of Valmiki Ramayana. It's the one of the best descriptions. I mean, when something is blessed by Brahma, I mean, you can see the beauty of that place. In fact, both Rama and Mahabharata are blessed by Brahma, both of them equally. Both of them, Brahma came to Vyasdev and Brahma came to Narad, to Valmiki as well. So thank you so much coming on the show. And for the audience, you heard 21 notes. Me and Yashodeep ji can go for a long time and discuss these things because there's so many aspects to cover here. But thank you for coming on the show and inspiring people. And people can, for those who are in the USA, Americans, you can always go to you can check out my book, check out Yashodeep 21 Notes on YouTube, 2121 NOTAES. Check out that on the YouTube and get a lot of information from there. And keep learning because this book is amazing. Like it's got, and one thing before I leave, the science has been made separate from the culture in the Western world. But in Ramayana, we see the science, technology, geography, nature, human interaction, everything coming together. Is that?
Yes.
It's like
Oh,
science is
definitely.
not separate.
I'll give you another example. When the rains come at Rishimukh, so they are after Vali's death, the rains arrive in around the modern town of Hampi. If you're familiar with the landscape, and Valmiki describes the rainfall. Now, in India, before the rains come, the ground is parched. It is dry, it is hot, and then the rains come, the monsoons come as a big relief. The shlok Valmiki uses is Navamasa Dhritam Garbham. So it is as though the clouds have sucked up moisture from the sea for 9 months and now are delivering the rain to this parched land. Actually, once again, this is beautiful poetry, but this is also a description of the water cycle. So he's saying the moisture goes from the sea into the clouds and then comes back down. And it is amazing that on one hand, he's talking of the resurgence of the land, the rebirth of the land. And he also talks of rebirth and, for 9 months, because the monsoons last for 3 months. So for 9 months, it had been sucking away the moisture from the sea. So another example of, poetry, emotions, and science is not separated.
That is the beauty of that scholarship of Valmiki. Like it's a combination, so you cannot separate it out. And in fact, we practice science every day, whether you notice or not. Something or the other we do logically, something we do which is common sense, something we do which is you're not going to, have ice cold water in the middle of in the night. It's something we do. All of us do. The entire culture does it. Some eccentric, some Americans may have something like that, but which is eccentricism. But normal people don't do that. Anyway, thank you so much and coming on the show. And for all the viewers, do watch, subscribe, and let us know your feedback. You will love this show.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you very much. Namaste.